Hi folks, the purpose of this training video is to demonstrate a working configuration of a OneLogin integration with Tempered's Conductor. OneLogin is an authentication platform that allows users to set up multi-factor authentication for either logging into the Conductor or for remote access users. First, let's demonstrate a working configuration. Once you've configured OneLogin to access the Conductor, you now have the option at the login page to choose the second authentication provider. So I'll choose this OneLogin in this case and click Sign In. Once I'm at the OneLogin prompt, I can log in with the username that it's been configured within OneLogin and enter the password as well. Here I'm just using # to log in. Next I'm asked to provide the second factor of authentication. Here's my phone, where I'll go ahead and click Accept. That logs me in. OneLogin is now notifying the Conductor to configure me and assign the proper role. Now I'm logged into the environment using my OneLogin setting. Here you see it marked with OneLogin. We can do the same thing for remote access users. I've already created a user in OneLogin, and what I can do is go into a remote access user and enable authentication. Here I've got a Windows agent. See how Airwall agent authentication has been enabled? And it's set up for OneLogin. If I go look at that agent, here's an agent that doesn't have access to the environment because they haven't authenticated. So to the remote agent user, they'll click OneLogin. From here the user is prompted to log in. In this case I haven't enabled multi-factor authentication, just username and password. But multi-factor could be turned on easily. Once the login is entered, user is asked to confirm the remote session to avoid a phishing attack. At that point you can see the Airwall agent shows it authenticated, and traffic begins immediately from the agent to the devices with which it has policy. So that's a working configuration for both Conductor access and Airwall agents. Let's go into the environments of both OneLogin and the Conductor and see how this got set up. The first thing you'll need to do is go to OneLogin and create an account if you don't have one already. Within OneLogin, as you can see here, we're going to create an application. So if I click on, go to Applications and add an app, I already have one created here. And let's look at what I've had to set up in order to get this working. So first of all, we have a display name, and then I've added an icon just so it shows up for the users. And then if we look at the configuration, so we're putting in the login URL of your Airwall Conductor here, and then the redirect URI, which will be your URL of your Conductor /user auth openid _connect /callback. So those are kind of two of the key initial steps. If we look at parameters, we've gone in and under the openid connect field groups, if I select it, we're actually changing the user role here to no transform. So that's different from the default setting. And then we go ahead and save that. And then nothing under rules. Under SSO, this is where you're going to get both the client ID and the client secret and the issuer. I've used the version 2 of the issuer in my working configuration. The token endpoint should be set to basic. Application type is set to web. I have created a policy for access called the tempered policy, and I've set up various roles. And then I've created various users. So users and roles we'll get into in just a bit, but let's look at the parameters here and look at what we had to set up in the Conductor. In the Conductor, in this particular instance, I do have a certificate assigned to my conductor, which will be needed for Mac authentication. Then if I just click on the settings icon and scroll down in the right hand side, this is where you add an external authentication provider. I've already added one for OneLogin, but let's go ahead and look at the settings that I've created. So first of all, you'll need to create a provider name. This is what shows up for the user when they log in to the conductor. You'll then enter your conductor URL here. Next, you'll add your OpenID Connect host. So this is the OneLogin, and I'm just going to go ahead and arrow across here so you can see the exact syntax here. So this is my login to OneLogin, and then the issuer, like I showed previously, is going to be the same, only we're going to have /OIDC/2, and then the client ID and the secret came from that SSO page within OneLogin. We don't check Use OpenID Connect Logout as that's not supported. The key to understanding how groups and roles work between OneLogin and the conductor is on this page. So we're going to check the box, use groups to manage roles. Any group, these are all custom names. We suggest using these 4 basic ones to get started, but you can create any names you'd like for your groups. And whatever you name them, wherever you create this group, that determines the role. So if you create a group in here called blah, it's actually going to, that group is going to have the role system admin. So just the area that you create it, not the name, determines what role they get. So when you create a user that has that particular group in OneLogin, it'll get assigned this role within the conductor. So to keep things started, or simple to get started, I recommend just using the conventions that we have here and have listed in the integration guide. So cond for short for conductor, and we have sysadmins, read-only admins, network admins, and remote users. Here I've shown another example of an additional group that you can create by comma separating them. And for example, you might want a user group for a particular vendor. If I click next, you'll see that you can filter out which groups show up. So I usually just keep it simple and go with starts with COND rather than using regex. But if you're working with existing groups in your OneLogin environment, you can obviously filter out more complex groups. So we can go ahead and click Finish there, and we should have everything set up in the conductor. Note that when you do hit Save there, you'll get logged out of your conductor as it restarts, and you'll have to log back in. Next, let's look at a basic example of roles and users within OneLogin. I'm not a OneLogin expert, so I'm just showing the basics here. Obviously, you can consult their instructions for how to set this up officially. But in order to get a working environment, I simply went to Users, Roles, and now I'm creating a role that matches the same group name that we created in the conductor. So that's where the linkage is here. So for example, conductor system admins, conductor remote users are 2 roles within OneLogin. And then I would create, and then next you create a user. So if I go into a particular user, for example, myself, if I create a user, I can go in and send an invitation to activate this user to create their password. But then if we look at authentication or applications is probably the best area to go, where you assign the role to the particular user and you assign the application to that user. And under authentication, that's where you can go in and set up MFA and some other things as well. So those should be the minimal components needed to get the environment working. Next, we'll demonstrate a working environment. So now that I've logged out of my conductor and come back in, I now will have a choice to choose either to log in via the conductor or OneLogin. Note that this OneLogin name here is what I customized when I created the application. So I'll choose OneLogin. I'll click Sign In. Since I'm already signed in, so it prompts you for a username, and I'm actually going to use Dashlane to go ahead and fill this in. And I'll enter my password. So now I'm authenticated via OneLogin. I don't have MFA set up for this user, but it's going to OneLogin to verify the user. And then if I look at who I'm logged in as myself. If I look under the People tab, you'll see that I'm actually logged in, and we show OneLogin here, and I'm in the system administrator. I have the system administrator role for this particular user. You can see that I've just logged in at 9:32. Next, let's look at a remote access user where we'll authenticate a remote access Airwall agent. So I've created a user called John Doe and set up their password. If we look at the Applications tab within OneLogin, you can see they're assigned to the remote role Conductor remote users, and we've added the application Tempered OpenID Connect for them to use. Now we can go into a particular agent within Tempered and enable user auth. So if I go into, let me go ahead and log back in with my previous login, just because I have my pinned items to the dashboard for easy access. So I'll go into a particular agent. You could enable this for all agents, but we'll just enable it for a single agent. What we're going to do is go down here and enable Airwall agent authentication. So click Edit Settings and require authenticated Airwall session, and now I'm going to choose the provider as OneLogin. I'll go ahead and click Update Settings, and you can see this agent now shows Airwall agent authentication is enabled. If we go look at this particular agent, you can see that it now will show that user auth is needed. So it needs user auth, and the user is prompted for a little OneLogin login. So I'll click that, and it takes me to the OneLogin, where I'm going to log in with the credentials of the remote access user. Now I could enable multi-factor authentication here as well to have to grab my phone and log in. Note that the user will get this confirm remote session authentication to prevent any type of phishing attacks. And so it says I've been authenticated. We see the little message from the agent. If I minimize that, I now show that user is authenticated as John Doe. We show it here in the control panel. We also show it here in the HIP networks view. And you can see that my traffic started immediately as well with these pings. If we go back to the conductor, we now show this agent with a remote access session that's been, and it does show the expiration time. Note the default was 24 hours there, but you can adjust that to whatever you need in your environment. Hopefully this simple example of OneLogin being integrated with Tempered's Conductor will help you get started with setting up your authentication environment for the Tempered environment. In summary, we've set up a user that allows the authentication to the conductor itself to be controlled from within OneLogin, and as you add new users, they can fall into the people groups that are assigned. So one note is that this people group is created the first time you add a user. Now the second time I add a remote user, they'll automatically fall into the same people group that you've created. Or if I add a new user to a unique people group, then it'll create the new user and add them to that group. So now we should be at a point where all the user administration for both conductor access and remote access users can be done in OneLogin. Thank you, and have a good day.